The ancient Roman stone walls whisper secrets, tales of individuals and forgotten fates beneath the gleaming spectacle of the arena. You will meet Marcus, the old-school official, whose bureaucratic battles were funnier than any sword fight. Lysander, the poet who transformed death into a final symphony, where verse confronted beast. Tiberius, the landlocked farmer, adrift on an artificial sea, turning fear into a bewildered dance of humanity. And Silas, the perfectionist architect, who stubbornly sought logic in an absurd, fatal performance. Each destiny is a poignant mark, illustrating human beauty, madness, and deep compassion. This is not just history. It is a mirror, reflecting ourselves, those who constantly seek meaning amidst life's fleeting currents. If these echoes from the past resonate with your soul, if you yearn to unveil these emotional depths, or if our story simply sparks your curiosity and interest, please consider giving this tale a like. To ensure you don't miss future journeys deep into the human spirit and historical mysteries, gently subscribe to our channel. And now, as you immerse yourself in this narrative, perhaps you could tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from, or what time of day it is for you.
The ground beneath you trembles, a deep, guttural growl vibrating up through your very bones. It's not an earthquake, it's the roar of 60,000 Roman souls, a single, monstrous voice, hungry for spectacle. Above the clamor, the sun, a fiery eye in the sky, beats down on the sand-dusted arena floor, where a solitary figure, thin as a willow branch in a hurricane, stands frozen, clutching a rusty gladius as if it were a fragile bird. His opponent, a hulking brute of a man, moves with the predatory grace of a hungry wolf, his shadow falling over the smaller figure like a shroud. You can almost feel the collective intake of breath from the tiered stands, a silent prayer, or perhaps a silent curse, hanging heavy in the air. This isn't a fair fight. It's a living, breathing testament to the brutal, beautiful absurdity of the Colosseum, a place where justice often wore a blindfold, not for impartiality, but because it simply couldn't bear to watch. Every stone of this magnificent structure, a honeycomb for gladiatorial bees, seems to hum with a forgotten song, a symphony of forgotten sighs and thunderous applause. As you stand before the colossal arches, worn smooth by the relentless caress of centuries, you're not just observing ancient ruins, you're witnessing the fossilized heart of an empire, still beating with the echoes of triumph and despair. It's a place where history isn't merely scribbled in dusty scrolls, but is carved into every fissure, every sun-bleached block. That peculiar chill tracing a spiderweb across your skin isn't the evening breeze. It's the whisper of myriad spirits, a ghostly chorus of all who entered this grand arena, their tales still yearning to break free from their stone prison. The Romans, bless their pragmatic, often bloodthirsty hearts, were astute observers of human nature. They understood that to keep an empire as vast and unruly as theirs from fracturing like cheap pottery, you needed two crucial ingredients: a bellyful of bread and, well, a generous serving of dramatic, often grisly entertainment. It was their ingenious form of public therapy, designed to distract the masses from the mundane realities of life, from, say, the emperor's latest questionable fashion choices or the perpetually rising price of olives. They didn't just construct an arena. They sculpted a masterful instrument of social control, a stage where the collective will of the people could both be manipulated and appeased, a testament to their unparalleled ingenuity in handling the complexities of societal unrest. Do you hear it? That faint, spectral roar? A sound like a distant avalanche tumbling down a mountain, yet so much more guttural and alive. That's the aggregated cheer of 60,000 souls, still reverberating through these venerable stones, a magnificent crescendo abruptly silenced by the relentless march of time. These are the phantom crowds, the true unsung protagonists of these ancient spectacles, their insatiable appetite dictating every brutal performance within these hallowed walls. They weren't mere spectators, passively observing the unfolding drama. They were active participants, their outstretched thumbs, like the whims of capricious deities, wielding the ultimate power of life and death. And it is through their collective clamor, their insatiable hunger for sensation, that you can truly begin to grasp the unique, often disquieting essence of this place. This magnificent structure, appearing as if a giant, benevolent hand scooped out its interior, was far more than a simple stadium. It served as a sprawling psychological laboratory, a crucible where the darkest, most unexamined corners of human fascination were laid bare under the unforgiving blaze of the Roman sun. It hummed with an energy both electrifying and terrifying, a constant reminder of the thin veil separating civilization from its primal instincts. Now, if by some strange twist of fate you ever stepped into the Colosseum expecting a fair fight, you'd be met with a disappointment so profound it would sting like 1,000 hornets. It would be akin to bringing a gourmet picnic basket to the very eye of a raging hurricane, undeniably charming in its utter naivete, but profoundly, hilariously out of place. This wasn't the Olympic Games, where athletes strove for glory within a framework of strict rules. Oh no, my friend. This was more closely aligned with a modern-day reality TV show, only with significantly fewer commercial breaks and a considerably higher mortality rate. The contests here weren't about athletic prowess in its purest, most noble form. They were meticulously engineered spectacles of pure theatricality and orchestrated mayhem. They didn't particularly care if the gladiators adhered to a rigid set of regulations. Their sole concern was whether the unfolding drama possessed enough visceral appeal to chew on, whether the crimson fluid flowed in aesthetically pleasing patterns across the golden sands. It was a high-stakes, macabre ballet where every graceful pirouette could very well be your last. And the voracious audience was perpetually ravenous for more, their collective breath held captive by every swing of a blade, every desperate parry. The very air thrummed with a raw, almost tangible excitement, a hunger that transcended mere entertainment and bordered on a primal need. The sheer, unadulterated ferocity of the crowd on game days was a colossal entity unto itself, a living, breathing beast as palpable as the very dust motes dancing in the arena's blinding sunlight. Imagine a colossal swarm of locusts, each tiny insect buzzing with an opinion, descending upon a verdant field of ripe grain. That, my dear listener, is the kind of insatiable hunger the Roman populace brought to these spine-chilling events. The air itself would grow thick and heavy with their palpable anticipation, a heady cocktail of fermented wine fumes, honest sweat, and the sharp metallic tang of newly spilled blood. Every thunderous cheer, every collective gasp of horror, every rhythmic stomp of their sandaled feet on the resonant wooden bleachers served as another brick in the towering wall of expectation that ominously surrounded the combatants. It was a chaotic, discordant symphony, and yet it possessed a strange, almost hypnotic dark rhythm, where the pulsating heart of the entire city seemed to beat in unsettling unison with the heart-stopping moments unfolding below. You could almost feel the raw vibrations of their unbridled excitement deep within your very bones, a primal, ancient hum that spoke of something both timeless and profoundly, disquietingly human, a reflection of the Empire's thirst for control and distraction.
This extraordinary journey we are about to embark upon transcends a mere historical recitation of epic battles or the celebrated sagas of legendary gladiators. No, this narrative delves far deeper, plunging beneath the glittering surface of spectacle and the echoing thunder of the crowds, to unearth something infinitely more poignant and unsettling: the profound, often tragic concept of unfair fates. You see, the Colosseum, in its architectural majesty, was rarely a stage designed for the truly even-handed contest between two equally matched seasoned combatants, where titans might clash like Zeus's thunderbolts meeting in a tempestuous storm. Oh no, my dear friend, such straightforward fairness would have been far too pedestrian, too utterly predictable for the sophisticated yet bloodthirsty Roman palate. Instead, it frequently served as a grand theatrical platform for the utterly preposterous, a bizarre, morbid performance where the scales of justice weren't merely tipped precariously. They were, with a flourish, contemptuously flung out of the nearest arched window, shattering into a million pieces upon the unforgiving, blood-soaked sands below. Here, in this arena of twisted logic, the very notion of fairness resembled a forgotten, dust-covered statue relegated to a dimly lit, seldom visited corner of the sprawling city. Everyone might vaguely acknowledge its once grand existence, and perhaps even appreciate its artistic form, but absolutely nobody genuinely bothered themselves with its actual practical meaning or its application within these walls. This arena, in its bewildering and brutal glory, was the place where the weak, the unfortunate, and the utterly unprepared were frequently thrown to the metaphorical and, sometimes quite literally, actual wolves, with barely a whisper of a chance at survival. It was here that the condemned were transformed into unwilling, bewildered actors in elaborate death scenes, meticulously choreographed for the sole purpose of public amusement, where the most vulnerable souls were systematically stripped of their inherent dignity and summarily tossed into scenarios that flagrantly defied all logical reason and every vestige of mercy. Imagine, if you dare, a game of chess where your opponent begins with a full army of formidable pieces, while you, the hapless player, are afforded nothing more than a single, hopelessly rusty thimble. That, my dear listener, provides but a faint glimmer of the monumental, soul-crushing uphill battle that countless individuals faced within these echoing confines. These were not the valiant narratives of heroic last stands whispered by bards through the ages. No, these were more often the hushed accounts of bewildered surrender, of a chilling, almost surreal acceptance of the utterly absurd. The very intricate structure of the games, the labyrinthine mechanisms hidden beneath the arena floor, meticulously designed to unleash startling surprises, all served one singular purpose: to heighten the dramatic tension, invariably at the direct, brutal expense of anything resembling a truly fair fight. It was a meticulously orchestrated dance of death, where the unseen stagehands wielded far more absolute power than the helpless performers, meticulously dictating every tragic, fatal pirouette. As we continue this extraordinary journey through time, we will diligently peel back the countless layers of accumulated dust and the unforgiving veil of the ages. Our purpose is not merely to gaze in admiration at the undeniable architectural genius of the Colosseum, breathtaking though it is, but rather to intimately comprehend the profound, deeply human stories that tragically unfolded within its vast, echoing embrace. We shall endeavor to uncover the hushed whispers of those who valiantly fought not for the fleeting glimmer of glory, but for the precious, fragile gift of a single, fleeting breath of life. We will strain to hear the silent screams that were cruelly drowned out by the thunderous roar of the insatiable crowd, and the desperate, unanswered prayers that tragically vanished into the boundless, indifferent Roman sky. It's a journey that will intricately weave its way through the myriad, often cruel facets of the Colosseum's unique brand of entertainment, patiently revealing the most unexpected and often heart-wrenching twists of fate that irrevocably transformed ordinary lives into extraordinary, albeit unwilling, spectacles of profound despair, defiant resilience, or even the most bizarre and unexpected forms of humor. Each subsequent chapter will meticulously present a unique, illuminating lens to gaze upon these unfair fates, with each one a meticulously polished fragment of a larger, infinitely more complex, and deeply moving mosaic of the universal human experience. So, are you prepared? Truly prepared to courageously lift the heavy veil of history, to attune your senses to the ancient whispers of weathered stone and the accumulated dust of countless ages, where these compelling, often heartbreaking, unfair fates are patiently waiting, yearning to be unveiled. This narrative promises to transport you far beyond the glossy postcards and the dry, factual pages of conventional history books, taking you deep into the very soul of this ancient, enigmatic monument. As you gently settle into your comfortable space, allow the faint ethereal echoes of the past to softly wash over you, like the comforting sensation of warm, fine sand gently sifting through your relaxed fingers. Close your eyes and allow your imagination to gracefully take flight with this unfolding story, where the deepest, most ancient mysteries will tenderly and softly lull you into a peaceful, restorative sleep. The incredible journey has only just begun, and the profound, deeply resonant secrets of the Colosseum patiently await your attentive ear. The clang of iron against stone, a sound as jarring as a philosopher's unfinished thought, reverberates through the damp, subterranean cell. It's a rhythmic, dull thud, punctuated by the distant, primal growl of something large and undeniably carnivorous. You find yourself standing, not in a sun-drenched Roman villa adorned with scholarly scrolls, but in a confined space, cold and reeking of stale fear and something vaguely metallic. The air hangs heavy, thick with the unsaid prayers of countless predecessors, each breath a silent echo of their desperation. This isn't a place designed for quiet contemplation or academic debate. It's the antechamber to the grand stage of oblivion, where life's final act is performed not for critics, but for the bloodthirsty masses. Here, in this shadowy prelude to doom, you meet Marcus. He's not the strapping figure you might imagine for such a locale. No bulging biceps or steely gaze. Instead, he's a man whose physique suggests a long, intimate relationship with parchment and quill, rather than sword and shield. His frame is as lean as a well-worn scroll, and his spectacles, perched precariously on a nose more accustomed to sniffing out grammatical errors than dodging lethal blows, are thick, magnifying his slightly bewildered, perpetually curious eyes. If you've ever encountered a professor whose world revolved entirely around the intricate dance of words and the profound logic of ancient arguments, so much so that they might accidentally attempt to cite Plato during a grocery run, then you've already met Marcus. He was a grammarian, a master of syntax, capable of debating the precise implications of a misplaced comma in a centuries-old text with the fervor of a general planning a military campaign. His crime? A trifle, really. Perhaps misquoting a senator, or, more likely, pointing out a logical fallacy in a powerful nobleman's drunken speech. A minor transgression, yet one that, in the labyrinthine and often nonsensical halls of Roman justice, led him directly to this damp, echoing cell. A cruel twist of fate, as ironic as a comedian telling a joke to a stone statue. Now, picture the scene. Marcus, standing amidst the grime, a man whose life's greatest peril until now involved paper cuts and the occasional ink stain, was deemed fit for public entertainment. The unfortunate souls like him, deemed expendable or simply inconvenient by the powers that be, weren't given the luxury of choosing their final act. Oh no, they were simply shoved onto the grand stage of the arena, often armed with little more than a prayer and a grim sense of humor. They were handed what the guards, with a sneer that stretched wider than the Tiber River, charmingly referred to as a sharp spoon, and then, with a theatrical flourish worthy of any tragedian, told to make it dramatic. Can you even begin to conjure such an image in your mind's eye? It's like being handed a toothpick and gravely instructed to defeat a fire-breathing dragon. Marcus, with his delicate hands and intellect as sharp as a newly sharpened quill, felt precisely that kind of absurd despair. Only his particular dragon happened to be rather adept with a gladius, and, unfortunately, lacked a comedic bone in its entire body. The sharp spoon he received was, of course, far from the gleaming instrument of death that Hollywood often portrays. No, it was more akin to a butter knife that had lost a long and arduous battle with a particularly stubborn block of aged cheese. A rusty, blunt shard of metal, perhaps once a dagger, now resembled a relic from a forgotten archaeological dig, its edge as dull as a politician's promise. Or, in other equally despairing turns of luck, it might have been a splintering, worm-eaten wooden club, more likely to give you splinters than inflict any real damage. With a grimace that looked suspiciously like a man trying to remember a particularly elusive Latin verb conjugation, Marcus would meticulously, almost ritually, attempt to sharpen this pathetic excuse for a weapon. He'd rub it against a rough stone in his cell, the scraping sound as desperate and futile as trying to sculpt marble with your bare fingernails. This was a symbolic effort, a last desperate cling to the illusion of preparation, as if he were meticulously preparing for a rather elaborate tea party with a notoriously demanding guest, rather than bracing himself for a brutal, one-sided battle to the death. The absurdity of it all hung in the air, a silent, mocking laughter echoing off the cold stone walls. The stage, as you might imagine, was set for a truly lopsided affair, a contest as balanced as a unicyclist on a tightrope during an earthquake. On one side you had the gladiators, men like Brutus. His muscles rippled under his tan skin like ancient garnered tree trunks rooted deep in the earth, and his eyes held the cold, unwavering gaze of a stone statue, devoid of anything resembling mercy or doubt. Brutus looked as if he'd just stepped straight off a propaganda poster promoting Roman might, every inch of him screaming raw, untamed power. He was a professional, a master of his deadly craft, honed by countless hours of brutal training and real-life combat, his movements as precise as a sculptor's chisel carving destiny. He was a living, breathing, exquisitely lethal weapon designed for one purpose, to entertain with death. And then, on the other side, there was Marcus, poor, bewildered Marcus. He was the antithesis of everything Brutus embodied. If Brutus was a thunderous storm, Marcus was a gentle summer rain. He was a man who, if asked about sword fighting, would likely respond with an insightful discourse on the etymology of the word gladius, or offer a lengthy explanation of tactical formations from ancient Greek texts. His understanding of combat came not from the clang of steel on steel, but from studying swordplay by observing shadows on the wall, or poring over ancient treatises on military strategy, filled with diagrams he probably understood better than the actual act of wielding a weapon. He looked, quite frankly, like a man who had just tragically lost a natural smile contest, his attempts at a fierce glare dissolving into something closer to mild confusion or a slight indigestion. His hands, accustomed to the delicate dance of parchment and ink, seemed utterly bewildered by the crude grip of the dagger, as if it were a foreign, alien object that had dared to invade his personal space. As the moment of truth loomed and the heavy gates groaned open, revealing the blinding glare of the arena and the thunderous roar of the crowd, Marcus's mind, a veritable library of arcane knowledge, began to race, not with fear, but with a series of utterly bizarre philosophical questions. It was as if his brain, faced with an existential crisis, defaulted to its most comfortable mode, academic inquiry. Would Aristotle, he wondered, his brow furrowed in concentration, consider this particular demise a logical conclusion to my life's narrative, or merely a random, unfortunate incident lying entirely outside the strictures of all logical reasoning? He even managed a wry internal chuckle, a bitter twist of humor at his own preposterous predicament. He attempted to crack a joke, a dry intellectual witticism, not to the crowd, but almost to himself, a tiny defiant spark against the overwhelming darkness. And then Brutus, a mountain of muscle and cold intent, began his slow, deliberate advance across the sands, each step a death knell echoing in Marcus's ears. Marcus, in a moment of sheer, almost involuntary dark humor, found himself whispering, not a plea, but a strange, polite query. "Excuse me, esteemed general," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the rising clamor, his eyes darting nervously between Brutus's enormous sandaled feet and the gleaming edge of his blade. "Might you happen to discern a beacon of illumination at the terminus of this rather gloomy tunnel? Or, perchance, is it merely the precipitous drop of the well into which I am quite literally about to plummet head first?" It was a question delivered with the delicate irony of a man asking for directions to the afterlife, yet imbued with a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor of genuine fear. This unexpected moment of intellectual sarcasm, a scholar's last stand, left the guards nearby bewildered, their faces contorted into masks of baffled amusement, their simple minds unable to process such an esoteric form of gallows humor. The absurdity of it all hung in the air, a testament to Marcus's unique spirit, a fragile lantern flickering defiantly in the face of absolute despair. This narrative invites you to delve deep into the complex labyrinth of Marcus's mind, to witness the poignant, darkly humorous struggle of a man whose only weapons are his intellect and his biting wit, thrust onto a stage where only brute force is understood. You'll explore a mind grappling with an unfair fate, where the very concepts of life and death seem to have dissolved into a cruel, cosmic jest. Can laughter truly serve as a weapon against the inevitable, deflecting the blows of fate like a shield against arrows? Or is it merely a translucent curtain, gracefully draped to obscure the raw, terrifying abyss of ultimate fear? The extraordinary journey of Marcus, our scholarly, unwilling combatant, has only just begun. We've merely scratched the surface of his ordeal, and the next steps promise even more bewildering encounters and unexpected turns. as you let the image of Marcus, with his academic grimace and his tragically dull dagger, gently settle into your thoughts, allow it to softly guide you into a peaceful slumber, anticipating the next, equally peculiar chapter of his fate. The Colosseum, a gaping maw of ancient stone, held its collective breath. You could feel it, the sudden, unnatural silence descending like a velvet curtain, replacing the usual cacophony of bloodlust. All eyes, 60,000 pairs, were now fixed not on the hulking brute of Brutus, but on the bewildered, skinny figure of Marcus, whose desperate scramble across the sands had become a bizarre ballet of ineptitude. His every clumsy stumble, every frantic dash was punctuated by a rising tide of snickers, a strange new symphony replacing the anticipated clash of steel. Brutus, his formidable presence momentarily lost in the unfolding farce, stood motionless, a statue of confusion amidst a whirlwind of absurd evasion, his weapon poised like a forgotten exclamation mark. This wasn't the heroic struggle the crowd had paid for. It was something far stranger, a comedic interlude performed on the very precipice of death, where the line between tragedy and farce blurred like watercolor in the rain. The air, thick with the scent of dust and stale fear, now pulsed with a new, unexpected energy. You could almost taste the bewilderment, as tangible as the dust on your tongue. Can you even begin to imagine such a scene, my friend, when an entire arena, a ravenous beast of human desire, is clamoring for a battle of epic proportions, a clash of titans that would shake the very foundations of Rome? They are instead treated to what could only be described as an impromptu, utterly unintentional comedy show. It's like arriving at a grand opera, expecting Wagner, and instead getting a clown juggling lemons. Unexpected, certainly, and oddly captivating, but far from the expected spectacle. The collective gasp of anticipation had morphed into something entirely different. A ripple of confused chuckles, a hesitant wave of mirth that began to spread like wildfire through the packed stands. The crowd, that vast, undulating sea of humanity, wasn't truly seeking abstract notions of justice, nor did they particularly care for the intricate nuances of fair play. Oh no, their desires were far simpler, far more visceral, like a spoiled child relentlessly demanding another piece of candy, regardless of the potential toothache. They yearned to witness raw, unadulterated drama, to see who would fall most beautifully, like a tragic hero in a Greek play, tumbling into oblivion with a flourish that would bring tears to the eyes of even the most hardened veteran. Or perhaps they wished to see someone who could feign the most heart-wrenching agony, twisting their face into a mask of theatrical despair so convincing it would earn them a posthumous standing ovation. They were, in essence, the most notoriously difficult art critics you could ever hope to encounter, each one of them hungrily anticipating nothing less than a meticulously crafted masterpiece of human suffering, elegantly performed and tragically concluded. Their discerning eyes scoured the arena not for true feats of strength or strategic brilliance, but for tantalizing glimpses of weakness, for the subtle cracks in the facade of courage, for anything that would elicit a guttural gasp, a thunderous cheer, or in Marcus's utterly unique case, an unexpected burst of uncontrollable laughter. His accidental clowning became his unintended lifeline, a peculiar dance with death. The reaction from the assembled multitude, that vast, undulating sea of human faces, was a fascinating study in the subtle, often contradictory shifts of human emotion. At first, as we observed, there was an overarching sense of confusion, like trying to follow a complex philosophical argument presented in a language you barely understood, where every premise seemed to contradict the last. But then, as Marcus continued his hapless yet strangely persistent attempts to avoid becoming a permanent, rather messy part of the arena's landscape, something truly peculiar began to ripple and spread through the tiered stands. Some spectators, particularly the more seasoned veterans of the Colosseum's grim entertainments, those whose faces bore the weary, cynical etchings of countless past spectacles, no longer registered any significant shock. Their sensibilities, hardened by years of witnessing the extreme, were now as impervious as the very stone they sat upon. Their capacity for surprise long since eroded. Instead, their hardened cynicism gave way to a detached, almost professional interest, like seasoned gamblers watching a bizarre game of chance. They began to place bets, their voices a low murmur like distant thunder, not on who would win, for that seemed a foregone conclusion, but on precisely how Marcus would execute his inevitable demise. Would he fall beautifully, performing a tragic ballet of a scholar's last moments, a dignified descent into oblivion? Or would he simply scamper like a headless chicken, a chaotic, undignified dash towards an equally undignified end? Among them, in a rather privileged front-row seat, sat an elderly matron, her posture as rigid as an ancient oak tree. Her hair, a wispy halo of silver, resembled the ethereal twilight clouds drifting languidly across the Roman sky, hinting at the vast expanse of time she had witnessed. Her face, a fascinating roadmap of wrinkles that spoke volumes of 1,000 unspoken judgments and forgotten spectacles, was set in an expression of profound, almost existential exasperation. She wasn't genuinely appalled by the unfolding violence. Her primary concern was simply Marcus's perceived inefficiency. Her voice, a brittle whisper that carried a surprising, almost regal authority despite its softness, could be clearly heard grumbling with the indignation of a truly put-upon soul. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she sighed, her words laced with an almost theatrical ennui, "can't the man run faster than a turtle crawling through molasses? He's making me miss my perfectly delightful lunch break." Her exasperation, so utterly mundane against the backdrop of a life-and-death struggle, served as a brilliant, unexpected humorous counterpoint, a testament to the audience's detached, almost casual engagement with the spectacle. She seemed more deeply concerned with the timely enjoyment of her midday meal than the precious fleeting life of a fellow human being, her priorities as solid and unyielding as the very ancient Roman concrete that held the Colosseum together. Marcus, meanwhile, utterly oblivious to the subtle shifts in the crowd's rapidly evolving expectations and the old woman's pressing culinary concerns, continued his desperate, clumsy ballet of survival. He wasn't attempting to engage the formidable Brutus in a noble, head-on duel. His tactical philosophy, if one could even dignify it with such a grand term, was one of pure, unadulterated evasion, a frantic dance with fate. He ran, he dodged, he weaved with all the grace of a drunken octopus. He stumbled. It was less a display of sophisticated martial arts and more an impromptu, magnificent exhibition of advanced klutziness. At one particularly memorable juncture, his rickety legs, more accustomed to the steady, unhurried gait of a contemplative stroll through the bustling forum, seemed to betray him entirely, sending him sprawling ungainfully to the dust-covered ground, with a pathetic, undignified thud that was more comical than tragic. He tripped majestically over his own feet, a truly magnificent display of accidental self-sabotage, like a mime artist performing a perfectly executed yet entirely unintentional pratfall. Perhaps in a truly bizarre stroke of improbable luck that only life's most profound absurdities can miraculously conjure, he even skidded dramatically on a stray olive pit, an innocuous, oily menace that became, in that fleeting moment, a sudden, utterly unexpected instrument of pure, unadulterated comedy, sending him spiraling into a heap on the sand. Each of these intentional, meticulously choreographed slapstick maneuvers, each clumsy evasion, each undignified sprawl into the sand, rather than inciting the expected rage or profound disappointment from the audience, ignited something far more powerful, something utterly unexpected and strangely beautiful in the stands. Uncontrollable booming laughter. It began as a faint, tentative ripple, a few scattered chuckles like tiny pebbles skipping across the placid surface of a pond. Then it swiftly swelled into a magnificent wave, a roaring ocean of unrestrained mirth that completely swallowed the usual guttural shouts for blood and violence. The audience, so utterly accustomed to the grim balletic ritual of death, found themselves caught entirely off guard, their carefully constructed expectations shattered into a million pieces by the sheer, unadulterated absurdity of Marcus's truly unique performance. They weren't laughing at Marcus in a purely cruel or malicious sense, not entirely. They were, in a strange, cathartic way, laughing with the bizarre, unexpected comedy of the situation, a collective release of tension that was both deeply therapeutic and profoundly, delightfully strange. His unwitting buffoonery became his unexpected shield, his clumsy pirouettes an accidental yet strangely effective dance with destiny.
And it was that laughter, my dear listener, that colossal, booming sound that echoed off the ancient stones, not any display of valor or strategic genius, that became his unlikely, utterly improbable savior. High above, in the imperial box, where the emperor sat enthroned, radiating absolute power like a miniature earthly sun god, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of genuine amusement finally crossed his usually impassive, calculating features. He had witnessed countless gladiatorial contests, seen vast oceans of blood spilled across these very sands, and heard every imaginable variation of cheer and groan that the human voice could produce. But this
This was utterly novel. This was entirely unexpected. In a rare, whimsical moment, a sudden, almost poetic spark of imperial caprice, the emperor slowly raised his hand not for the decisive thumb-down gesture of death, but for the universal, life-affirming sign of clemency. He granted Marcus his precious life not because he was a formidable warrior or a cunning strategist, but because in his majestic, if somewhat eccentric wisdom, he officially declared that Marcus had brought an unexpected burst of pure, unadulterated laughter to a most dreary afternoon. Like a poem, without rhyme or reason, yet utterly captivating. It was a decision as startling and unexpected as a sudden, brilliant burst of sunlight piercing dramatically through a thick, oppressive bank of stormy clouds, transforming the grim, blood-soaked arena into a vibrant, improbable stage for an unlikely, comical reprieve. The crowd, momentarily stunned into a hushed silence, soon erupted in another magnificent wave of cheers, not for the brutal fight they had expected, but for the sheer audacity of fate's comedic twist, a testament to the unpredictable nature of human entertainment. This narrative is a profound testament to the astonishing, often bewildering truth that sometimes, in the most profoundly unfair and seemingly hopeless circumstances, utter clumsiness and pure, unadorned absurdity can miraculously become the unexpected key to unlocking the very doors of survival. It's a gentle, yet powerful reminder that life, even in its grimmest, most unforgiving corners, often possesses a delightfully mischievous sense of humor, a peculiar tendency to twist and contort our carefully constructed expectations into something utterly unforeseen and often hilariously ironic. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? In the grand arena of life, where countless battles are fought and countless fates are inexorably sealed, can laughter truly be wielded as the most potent weapon, skillfully deflecting the inevitable blows of adversity with a joyous, defiant abandon? Or is it merely a translucent, shimmering veil, cleverly draped to obscure the raw, terrifying abyss of our deepest, most primal fears, like a beautiful, deceptive mirage masking a barren, unforgiving desert? Marcus's extraordinary tale leaves us with this lingering, thought-provoking question, a subtle smile playing on our lips, even as our minds ponder the deeper philosophical implications. As you allow the vibrant image of Marcus, our scholarly hero, with his perpetual academic grimace and his surprisingly life-saving clumsiness, to gently settle into the quiet, contemplative corners of your mind, allow it to softly guide you into a state of profound and peaceful slumber. Let the echoing remnants of the crowd's unexpected laughter, a sound that defied all logical expectations, lull you into a serene tranquility, where the most peculiar and improbable triumphs still possess the magical power to surprise and delight the soul. Tomorrow, we will delve into another chapter of Unfair Fates. A new journey awaits us, perhaps one where the elegance of art and the raw ferocity of the wild collide in the most unexpected and poignant of ways. But for now, rest deeply, and let Marcus's bizarre, triumphant escape bring you dreams as delightfully absurd and unexpectedly joyful as his miraculous reprieve. The stench of fear was a tangible thing, clinging to the damp, shadowed stone walls like a second skin. It was heavier than any perfume, more potent than any wine, a suffocating blanket woven from the terror of countless souls. A low, guttural growl vibrated through the very floor beneath your feet, not the distant thunder of human applause, but the deep, resonant purr of a caged predator, anticipating its gruesome meal. You could feel the air grow cold, as if the very breath of death had just swept through, rustling the fabric of time. The colossal iron gates, grim as the jaws of Tartarus itself, stood poised to swing open, revealing not a celebrated gladiatorial champion, but a silent, dusty stage for a chilling, one-sided execution. In this somber tableau, the sun, usually a benevolent Roman deity, seemed to hold its golden rays, casting only a muted, mournful light upon the arena, as if even the heavens themselves wept for the spectacle about to unfold. Here, amidst this suffocating atmosphere of dread, you meet Lysander. He wasn't a man forged from the rough-hewn clay of gladiatorial might, nor was he burdened by the scholarly awkwardness of a Marcus. No, Lysander was a creature of a different, more ethereal realm, a young poet from the verdant lands of Gaul, his spirit as light and free as a dandelion seed carried on the summer breeze. His eyes, deep pools reflecting the boundless heavens, were habitually dreamy, more accustomed to tracing the delicate patterns of fleeting clouds or observing the silent dance of leaves caught in the wind than contemplating the harsh, unyielding reality of stone walls and looming death. He was perhaps the only soul within these brutal confines who could perceive every glistening dewdrop as a nascent verse, and every single fallen leaf as a profound repository of ancient philosophical wisdom. He saw the world not through the lens of power or conquest, but through the delicate prism of beauty and profound meaning, like a painter capturing the subtle shift of light on a canvas. His crime, a whisper among the powerful, was ironically labeled blasphemy against the gods, though, if truth were a river, it would reveal he merely possessed the audacity, the sheer unbridled temerity to gently critique the rather questionable intellectual capacity of certain Roman aristocrats through his subtle, biting verse. A poet condemned for his poetry, a cruel jest etched by the hand of fate. This grim theatrical act unfolding before you was known by its chillingly eloquent Roman name, damnatio ad bestias. It wasn't merely a punishment, it was a brutal, undeniable declaration of power, a public service announcement etched in blood and fear. Imagine, if you will, the Roman justice system, not as a balanced scale, but an elaborate, cruel zoo where the accused, stripped of dignity and hope, were tossed into cages with ravenous beasts without even the courtesy of a dull butter knife to defend themselves. This was not justice in any recognizable form. This was a macabre circus, only with one terrifying difference. The human beings were the unfortunate, unwilling animals forced to perform for the amusement of the gods and the masses. It was a spectacle designed not to correct a wrong, but to instill profound, bone-deep terror, a chilling reminder that the empire's grip was as firm and unyielding as a lion's jaws. And the beasts, oh, the magnificent, terrifying beasts, these were not mere animals confined and forgotten. Far from it. These magnificent creatures were treated with a reverence that bordered on divine, pampered and adored like the most celebrated gladiatorial champions themselves, their every need meticulously catered to with almost absurd devotion. They were the true stars of this gruesome show, their roars and predatory grace the main attraction, overshadowing the human despair. Their transportation conditions were often superior to those afforded to even the most esteemed Roman citizens, their journeys to the Colosseum cushioned and cared for, as if they were fragile vases of priceless antiquity. And their meals, why, these pampered predators were often fed with a lavishness that would make a common plebeian weep with envy, enjoying cuts of meat far more succulent and abundant than anything gracing the tables of many a humble Roman family. They were cared for with a meticulousness that surpassed even the most fastidious attention given to certain esteemed senators, a truth that, if you truly ponder it, is both hilariously absurd and profoundly, tragically ironic. They were the pampered pets of the empire, their wildness harnessed and directed for the grim purpose of entertainment, their every need catered to, ensuring they remained in peak performance condition for their chilling acts. The true, insidious purpose of this chilling display, this damnatio ad bestias, transcended mere punishment. It was a carefully orchestrated message, etched in the very fabric of Roman society for all to see and tremble before. This wasn't merely about condemning an individual to a gruesome end. It was about the empire asserting its absolute, unquestionable dominance over life and death itself. It declared in the most visceral terms possible that Rome not only had the power to punish you for your transgressions, real or imagined, but also possessed the chilling ability to transform your very demise into a captivating, horrifying piece of public theater, a living, breathing, dying warning for all who dared to defy its omnipotent will. Your final breaths, your last moments of terror, were meticulously woven into the fabric of a grand performance, designed to serve as a stark, unforgettable reminder of imperial might, a grim tableau vivant that would burn itself into the collective consciousness of the populace. It was the ultimate power play, a chilling demonstration that your very existence, even your death, was merely a tool in the empire's vast, intricate machinery of control, a morbid yet undeniably effective form of public relations.
Then, with a deafening groan that seemed to echo from the very depths of the earth, the colossal iron gate, rusted and ancient, slowly creaked open. A collective gasp rippled through the stands, a sudden sharp intake of breath like a single monstrous lung drawing in the atmosphere. From the yawning darkness of the beast pens, a magnificent golden-maned lion emerged, its powerful form silhouetted against the muted light of the arena. Its roar, a sound as primal and thunderous as a lightning bolt rending the very sky, tore through the tense air, reverberating off the stone arches and shaking the sand underfoot. It was a sound that would typically send shivers of terror down the spines of even the bravest men, forcing them into panicked flight or desperate screams. Yet, Lysander, our unassuming poet, did not scream. He did not run. His gaze, far from faltering, widened slightly, fixing itself directly upon the lion's piercing golden eyes, which shimmered with an ancient, untamed wisdom. And then, defying all expectation, he began to speak. Not a plea, not a desperate cry for mercy, but a low, melodious recitation. He began to weave verses, his voice a fragile thread against the lion's guttural growl, speaking of the boundless freedom of the human spirit, a concept as vast and untamable as the wild winds. He spoke of the exquisite, fleeting beauty of untamed nature, of sun-dappled forests and clear, flowing streams, and of the profound, bittersweet impermanence of all life, a truth as undeniable as the shifting sands of time. His poetic voice was so incredibly faint that only he, perhaps, could truly discern its delicate melody amidst the arena's suffocating silence. Yet those whispered words were the very last world he desperately clung to, a fragile, invisible wall erected between his soaring spirit and the imminent, brutal savagery that relentlessly advanced upon him. It was a profound, almost defiant act of creation in the face of absolute destruction, a final, beautiful symphony played on the strings of his very soul. This journey invites you to witness the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit, a testament to its profound beauty, even when confronted by the most grotesque and unjust forms of death. It delves into a world where art, even in its most fragile form, can rise above the clamor of the crowd and the roar of the beast, becoming a defiant voice of profound truth in the face of absolute, terrifying power. It asks a powerful, poignant question, one that lingers long after the echoes of the arena have faded. Can a mere verse, a fragile string of words woven together with profound meaning, truly possess the astonishing power to soothe the savage beast, to calm the wild, untamed heart of a predator? Or is it merely a haunting, elegiac farewell, a beautiful, poignant final melody for a noble soul ascending to the heavens, destined to be consumed by the inevitable? The narrative of Lysander, our courageous poet, has only just begun to unveil its haunting, beautiful notes, and the next movements promise to explore the delicate dance between life, death, and the enduring power of creation. As you settle into a state of serene rest, let the poignant echoes of Lysander's last verse gently guide you into a peaceful slumber, reminding you that true beauty can emerge even from the deepest shadows.
A silence so profound it felt like the world itself had momentarily ceased its spinning, descended upon the vast, echoing amphitheater. It wasn't the hush of anticipation, nor the gasp of horror, but a peculiar stillness, heavy with confusion. You could feel it, the strange suspension in the very air, as if time itself, that relentless, ever-marching conqueror, had decided to hold its breath, pausing reverently before something truly extraordinary was about to unfold. The roar of the crowd, that hungry, guttural beast of human emotion, had been abruptly silenced, replaced by a collective murmur of bewilderment. They were witnessing a performance that stubbornly refused to follow their well-worn script of violence and despair, a theatrical anomaly orchestrated by a poet and a lion, leaving their expectations hanging in the balance like a forgotten lute string. Here, in this unexpected lull, the audience, usually as predictable as the rising sun, found themselves caught in a perplexing tableau. They were bewildered by Lysander's unscripted performance and the lion's equally baffling hesitation, their minds struggling to reconcile the gentle poetry with the brutal reality they craved. It was a moment of profound cognitive dissonance, like expecting a thunderstorm and instead getting a single, perfect snowflake. The air itself seemed to vibrate with unspoken questions, with the audience's collective mind struggling to compute this bizarre, almost spiritual standoff. The audience, in their vast, undulating sea of faces, generally cared little for the intricate fates of man or beast. Their desire was simple, primal, and as insatiable as a Roman banquet. They craved drama. They wanted the raw, visceral thrill of life and death served up on a platter of sand and blood. Yet this time, an inexplicable, almost reverent silence had descended upon them, thick and palpable as a winter fog. It wasn't just quiet. It was a profound, almost uncomfortable stillness that made the hairs on your arms stand on end. Some in the crowd, those who had come purely for the satisfying crunch of bones and the gush of crimson, began to shift uncomfortably in their seats, a low, frustrated murmur rippling through their ranks. They actually felt annoyed because the performance, Lysander's ethereal recital, was not authentic to the violence they craved, not delivering the expected symphony of screams and desperate pleas. Their bloodlust, usually a roaring fire, had been doused by a gentle drizzle of poetry, leaving them feeling oddly cheated, like a child who received a book instead of a toy for Saturnalia. The lion, a magnificent creature of instinct and raw power, seemed to share this peculiar sense of confusion, its gaze fixed on Lysander with an intensity that defied easy explanation, its tail swishing slowly, almost thoughtfully through the dust. Then, with a sudden, devastating surge of raw power, the lion finally launched itself forward. It was a movement of breathtaking speed and lethal grace, a blur of golden fur and rippling muscle. But it was not the frenzied, savage attack the crowd had come to expect, not the prolonged, agonizing spectacle they secretly craved. No, this was different. The beast, with an efficiency that bordered on profound, almost merciful precision, closed the distance and seized Lysander. The action was swift, decisive, like the final, perfect stroke of a master painter. There was no prolonged struggle, no blood-curdling screams to punctuate the air, no agonizing display of terror for the delight of the masses. Instead, this narrative must paint Lysander's final moments not in gruesome detail, but as the abrupt, poignant cessation of a beautiful melody, an unfinished symphony abruptly cut short in the echoing heart of the Colosseum. It was the last note dissolving into the air, a final ethereal chord that resonated not with despair, but with a profound, haunting sense of beauty tragically interrupted. It was akin to a priceless painting, meticulously crafted over years, being torn apart with a single decisive rip, leaving behind an unbearable, lingering sense of irretrievable loss and profound regret. The silence that followed was not merely the absence of sound, it was a vacuum, an emptiness filled with the ghost of a poem, a poignant silence that spoke volumes more than any cheer or cry ever could. The audience, caught entirely off guard by the swift, almost understated conclusion, reacted with a silence that was deeply unsettling, a collective bewilderment that hung heavy in the vast expanse of the arena. They had anticipated a prolonged, visceral struggle, a dramatic dance of death. Instead, they received a sudden, almost clinical end, devoid of the theatricality they craved. This wasn't the kind of bloodshed that excited their primal instincts. It was too quick, too quiet. A few scattered claps, hesitant and uncertain, died almost immediately. The usual roar of approval, the thunderous demands for more, were conspicuously absent. A palpable sense of dissatisfaction rippled through the upper tiers, a silent grumble. They hadn't seen the glorious, drawn-out suffering they craved. Lysander, in his own poetic way, had denied them their expected spectacle, his death becoming a final, defiant act of artistic integrity. They were left with an uneasy feeling, a sense of having witnessed something profound yet unfulfilling, like being promised a feast and only receiving a single, exquisitely prepared but tragically small morsel.
This unique incident, Lysander's strangely poetic demise, brings to mind the broader context of the Venationes, the animal hunts that often preceded or punctuated the gladiatorial games. These weren't just about man versus beast. They were complex, often brutal displays designed to showcase exotic animals and Rome's mastery over nature. But if you consider it, these Venationes were often shrouded in their own particular brand of reverse injustice, a cruel irony that extended even to the magnificent creatures themselves. Imagine for a moment a proud lion, trapped and forced to fight, perhaps weakened by a hidden illness, its magnificent spirit dulled by days of starvation in damp, cramped cages, or even subtly drugged to ensure a more pliant performance for the baying crowd. These animals, majestic symbols of untamed wildness, were often victims themselves, their natural instincts manipulated, their lives reduced to mere props in Rome's grand, bloody theater. Lysander's story then subtly highlights this wider tragic circle of brutality, where both humans and beasts, caught in the relentless maw of the empire's insatiable desire for spectacle, became unsuspecting, unwilling victims. They were both pawns in a colossal game, their freedom and dignity stripped away for the entertainment of a jaded populace. The death of Lysander, in its quiet, almost artistic finality, was anything but meaningless. It was a profound, lingering question mark, etched into the very fabric of the Colosseum's grim history, a silent testament to the enduring human spirit. It compelled the subtle yet powerful contemplation of humanity itself, of the chilling ease with which brutality can be transformed into entertainment, and of the fragile yet resilient boundary between true art and wanton destruction. Was it merely a random, brutal act of nature, or was there perhaps a whisper of something more profound? Could it be,
even for a fleeting moment, that death itself, that ultimate, unwavering arbiter of all things, softened its icy grip, perhaps swayed by the sheer, unadulterated beauty of a poet's final song? Or was it merely the cold, indifferent coincidence of an uncaring fate, a random twist in the cosmic tapestry? Lysander's passing, devoid of the expected theatrical gore, left behind a haunting echo, a poignant melody that resonated with questions about compassion, about the value of a life, and about the surprising ways in which dignity can be maintained even in the face of absolute annihilation. It was a final, graceful bow from a soul too vast for the confines of the arena, a testament to the enduring power of creation over destruction. This narrative is a heartfelt invitation to delve deeper, to ponder the perplexing limits of human violence, and to truly grasp the astonishing, enduring strength of the human spirit. It asks you to look beyond the obvious, beyond the shouts and the blood, to find the subtle truths that whisper in the silence. For even in the heart of the most brutal arena, or indeed in the challenging expanse of life itself, sometimes death can transcend its grim finality and transform into a truly poignant work of art, a tragic yet beautiful requiem. It becomes a soft, almost ethereal whisper about the profound meaninglessness of violence when confronted by the unyielding, vibrant beauty of the human spirit. A testament to the fact that some things simply cannot be destroyed. Perhaps in those final, breathtaking moments, when all worldly ties are severed and all pretense crumbles, human beings truly discover their most authentic, most unrestrained selves, soaring as freely as a bird taking flight for the last time just before dissolving into the silent, vast emptiness of oblivion. Let this thought linger, as soft as a moth's wings, guiding you gently into the embrace of sleep. Imagine if your wildest dreams ever collided with the most perplexing historical oddities. The colossal stone bowl of the Roman Colosseum, not shimmering with the usual glint of sand and steel, but transformed into a vast, shimmering inland sea. You can almost feel the dampness rising from the artificial depths, mingling with the dry Roman air, a peculiar contrast that tugs at the very edges of reality. Tiny yet formidable warships bobbed upon its newly formed surface, their miniature prows cutting through ripples that were once the dust of gladiatorial combat. Just when you, with your modern sensibilities, thought the Colosseum couldn't possibly get any crazier, Rome, with a theatrical flourish only an empire could manage, simply declared, "What if we turned it into a gigantic lake? Oh, and darling, we'll simply toss in a few landlocked farmers who've never glimpsed the ocean and tell them to row for their lives." It was a spectacle born of a singular, magnificent madness, a testament to Roman ingenuity and their utterly boundless capacity for extravagant, often absurd entertainment. The very idea was as outlandish as teaching a fish to climb a tree, yet here it was, a liquid stage for a drama of the most illogical kind. Here, Adrift on this improbable expanse of water, you meet Tiberius. He wasn't a weathered sailor, nor a seasoned legionary accustomed to the roar of battle. Instead, he was a man whose entire existence was intimately woven into the very fabric of the earth. An old farmer, his back perpetually bowed like a weeping willow from countless seasons spent tilling the rich, fertile soil. His hands, gnarled and calloused, bore the unmistakable etchings of a lifetime dedicated to the tender, unyielding embrace of his beloved grapevines. Tiberius resembled an ancient, deep-rooted oak tree, its gnarled roots clinging stubbornly to the very essence of the earth, as if unwilling to release its embrace. He possessed an almost mystical connection to his land. He could practically read the impending weather from the earthy scent of the soil after a light rain, and he conversed with his grapevines as if they were his own beloved offspring, murmuring secrets and encouragements as he pruned and tended them. His crime? A seemingly insignificant oversight. A minor discrepancy in his tax contributions of grapes, a mere handful of forgotten clusters perhaps, or a miscalculation in the yearly yield, a trifle in the grand scheme of an empire. Yet this minor fiscal transgression, as trivial as a single drugged grape, led him, with a cruel twist of fate, directly to this watery nightmare, a truly horrifying and utterly baffling destiny for a man of the earth. This bizarre transformation of the Colosseum, from a sandy arena to a vast, shimmering lake, was known as the Naumachia, a spectacle of simulated naval battles. It was a dizzying display of Roman engineering prowess, a testament to their audacious ambition, allowing them to flood the arena floor with enough water to float entire fleets of miniature warships, transforming solid ground into a shimmering, liquid stage. All of it, every single gurgle and splash, was an intricately choreographed piece of a colossal dramatic production, only with one crucial, rather inconvenient caveat. The unfortunate actors were utterly, hopelessly untrained for their aquatic roles. It was as if a brilliant playwright had conceived a masterpiece, but then cast the lead roles with people who had never even seen a stage, let alone learned a single line of dialogue. The ability to flood the Colosseum for these aquatic displays was truly an ingenious feat of hydraulic engineering, a marvel that would make even modern engineers scratch their heads in admiration. Yet this astounding technical achievement came in hand with almost boundless capacity for the absurd, proving that the Romans prioritized spectacle over common sense, turning a dry arena into a liquid stage for bewildered landlubbers. The mechanics of this watery transformation were to a land dweller like Tiberius nothing short of bewildering, a magic trick performed by unseen hands. Giant sluice gates beneath the arena floor, like the hidden valves of a colossal heart, would be opened, allowing torrents of water to rush in, filling the vast basin with astonishing speed. The purpose of these staged naval battles was twofold. Sometimes they would meticulously recreate famous historical sea engagements, turning ancient victories into living, albeit liquid, history lessons. Other times, they were simply an extravagant display of imperial might and boundless wealth, a ridiculously expensive form of aquatic entertainment designed solely to amuse the perpetually ravenous crowds. The spectacle itself, regardless of its historical accuracy, was always grand, always dazzling, and always deeply and undeniably unfair to those forced to participate without so much as a rudimentary swimming lesson.
Tiberius, our unfortunate grape grower, found himself truly adrift in more ways than one. His feet, those trusty anchors that had served him faithfully through countless seasons of muddy vineyards, were now adrift on a perpetually swaying wooden deck, as unsteady as a drunken senator's moral compass. He stumbled, he lurched, his every movement a pathetic imitation of a sailor's graceful sway. He looked precisely like a chicken trapped in a goldfish bowl, utterly bewildered and entirely at a loss as to what to do with all this wet space. His attempts at rowing were a masterclass in nautical futility. He gripped the oar as if it were a stubborn hoe, attempting to cultivate the water with the same methodical yet utterly inappropriate motions he used for his beloved soil. This resulted in his small vessel spinning helplessly in circles, often narrowly avoiding collisions with bewildered comrades, creating a ballet of accidental chaos on the makeshift lake. His constant lamentations, audible even over the distant murmur of the crowd, were a testament to his profound disorientation. He grumbled incessantly about this monstrous, disgusting giant pond, and how the water is shockingly, inexplicably salty, his voice a high-pitched whine of genuine discomfort. He couldn't help but draw constant, exasperated comparisons to the familiar, comforting duck pond back on his humble farm, a world away from this brine-filled nightmare. The absurdity of a grape farmer forced to fight a naval battle in a puddle was a cosmic joke, and Tiberius was the punchline. The environment within the flooded Colosseum, far from being a pristine, inviting body of water, was often as unappealing as a neglected Roman public bathhouse. The water, a murky, uninviting brown, wasn't always fresh and sparkling, despite the immense engineering effort involved. It frequently carried the distinct, unpleasant odor of stale mud, the lingering scent of accumulated human sweat from past contests, and even more disturbingly, the faint yet unmistakable aroma of various unwanted offerings from previous, less dignified spectacles. These might include discarded olive pits, lost sandals, or even the remnants of floral garlands tossed in celebration. The artificial waves, generated by the chaotic movements of the larger, more robust vessels, and perhaps even by hidden mechanisms designed to enhance the drama, caused Tiberius's small boat to pitch and roll with nauseating regularity. This perpetual motion only compounded his misery, exacerbating his already profound seasickness and making it even more challenging for him to maintain any semblance of balance on the precarious deck. He swayed like a drunkard, his face a sickly green, his internal compass spinning wildly, yearning for the solid, predictable ground of his vineyard, a world where the only waves he encountered were those of ripening grapes in the gentle breeze. This story is a poignant journey into the depths of disorientation, a testament to the bewildering tragedy of utter displacement. It invites you to witness the profound bewilderment of a simple man, a son of the soil, ruthlessly plucked from the comforting familiarity of his earthen world and thrust violently into a realm as alien and utterly illogical as a dream. It's a narrative that explores the raw, often humorous anguish of helplessness,
where the absurdity of one's fate transmutes into a quiet, almost desperate form of unintentional comedy. You'll find yourself laughing, perhaps, but it will be a laughter tinged with empathy, a shared grimace for a man so profoundly out of his element. Can a man whose life has been entirely defined by the rhythm of the seasons and the comforting embrace of fertile soil possibly find a viable escape route on this strange, man-made sea, a churning expanse of water where every ripple feels like a personal affront? Or has his fate, like a stubborn grapevine refusing to bear fruit, been already irrevocably sealed, destined to sink beneath the murky waves, taking with him only the cherished, fading memories of his sun-drenched vineyards? The aquatic voyage of Tiberius, our reluctant sailor, has only just begun to unfurl its sails, and the treacherous, unpredictable waves of absurdity still lie ominously ahead, promising more twists and turns than a meandering Roman road. As you let the image of Tiberius, adrift and bewildered, gently settle into your mind, allow it softly to guide you into a peaceful slumber, reminding you that sometimes, even in the most bizarre circumstances, the human spirit, however misplaced, finds its own peculiar way to navigate the absurd. The artificial sea churned, a swirling vortex of muddy water, miniature warships, and the desperate cries of bewildered men. You could almost feel the spray on your face, the chaotic symphony of splintering wood and desperate shouts echoing from the confines of the colossal arena. It was a mock naval battle, yet the chaos was disturbingly real, a tempest contained within stone walls. Amid this aquatic maelstrom, where every splash seemed to reverberate with the futility of it all, your gaze, drawn by a strange, almost magnetic pull, settles upon the small, solitary figure of Tiberius. He was an insignificant speck upon this vast man-made ocean, as isolated as a single star in an infinite sky, his tiny vessel tossed about like a forgotten toy in a giant's bathtub. The very air around him seemed to thicken with his quiet desperation, a personal tragedy unfolding amidst the public spectacle, utterly unnoticed by the ravenous thousands. Can you truly imagine it, my friend? Thousands upon thousands of eyes, a hungry, unblinking legion, were undeniably fixed upon you, their collective gaze as piercing as 1,000 sunbeams converging on a single point. Yet, in that blinding glare, with a cruel irony that only fate could concoct, not a single soul among them truly saw you. They did not perceive the raw, unvarnished terror shimmering in your eyes, a fear as cold and vast as the deep ocean. Nor did they witness the subtle, profound acceptance that slowly, serenely settled upon your weathered features, a quiet surrender that whispered of a wisdom beyond their comprehension. It was a spotlight that illuminated nothing, a grand stage where the most poignant drama played out in utter and heartbreaking anonymity. You were merely a fleeting brushstroke in their grand, bloodthirsty canvas of entertainment, a statistic, a momentary diversion, utterly devoid of the deeper human narrative that defined your very existence. The vessels in these naumachii were, as you now know, smaller than their true oceanic counterparts, yet they were meticulously crafted, adorned with vibrant flags that snapped defiantly in the artificial breeze, and painted with striking designs, giving them the appearance of formidable miniature navies. And their armaments? Oh, they carried real, albeit scaled-down weapons, harpoons, grappling hooks, and even rudimentary catapults, all designed to ensure a suitably dramatic, if not entirely realistic, naval engagement. The grim reality of these aquatic spectacles meant that it was almost an inevitability that participants would either fall overboard, be mercilessly shoved into the murky depths by a zealous opponent, or, in a twisted act of self-preservation, deliberately plunge into the water, choosing a swift, watery grave over a prolonged, agonizing fight on deck. Tiberius, our land-loving mariner, continued his futile yet oddly persistent attempts to wield his oar, his movements as clumsy and ineffective as a fish trying to ride a bicycle. His small boat, a mere speck in the churning expanse, was now like a withered leaf caught in the heart of a hurricane, tossed mercilessly by the artificial waves, its flimsy structure groaning under the strain. He was a man fighting the ocean with a garden hoe, and the ocean, in its vast indifference, was winning. Then, amidst the chaotic crescendo of the mock battle, a jarring, sickening crunch echoed through the water, a sound as final as the closing of a tomb. Tiberius's small vessel, his flimsy refuge on this bewildering sea, was struck, its wooden hull pierced like fragile parchment. A gaping hole appeared, swallowing water with alarming speed, pulling his tiny world down into the murky depths. And Tiberius, bless his land-rooted soul, did not know how to swim. The irony hung heavy in the air, a cruel, invisible noose. As his world tilted violently, as the cold, foul water rushed up to embrace him, a strange, almost serene calm settled over his weathered features. He uttered no cry of panic, no desperate scream for help that would be lost in the din. Instead, a faint sigh, a whisper of resignation escaped his lips, a sound as gentle and accepting as a tired old man sinking into his favorite chair. "Ah, just like watering the grapevines, after all," he murmured, his voice barely a gurgle, as if trying to rationalize this utterly alien experience with the familiar comfort of his agricultural life. He simply sank, slowly, serenely, with a face eerily devoid of terror, as if he were merely tending to his beloved crops, his acceptance of fate as profound and peaceful as the very last breath of a candle flickering out in the wind. It was not a death of struggle, but of quiet, almost poetic surrender, a final, poignant acknowledgement of an unavoidable end. The audience, meanwhile, remained utterly detached, their perspective as removed and indifferent as passengers on a luxurious cruise ship observing a minor buffet fire, a mix of fleeting bewilderment and vague, morbid amusement. Their gaze was fixed not on the fate of individual souls, but on the grand, sweeping spectacle, the broad strokes of the naval drama. They cared little for the intricate details of naval strategy, nor for the personal tragedies unfolding beneath the splashes. Their primary objective, their primal hunger, was simply to witness someone, anyone, tumble dramatically from a ship, a satisfying splash for their entertainment. The vast, roaring crowd, in their detached enjoyment, did not register Tiberius's quiet, dignified passing. They saw no death, only a sudden plunge, a particularly dramatic, unexpected dunking that added a delightful new element to the show. They cheered, their voices rising in a triumphant crescendo, not for a life lost, but for the sheer, spectacular sight of a body disappearing beneath the waves, mistaking profound tragedy for mere entertainment. His final, silent moment was consumed by their insatiable appetite for superficial thrills, a testament to their chilling indifference. Ultimately, the grand spectacles of the Naumachie within the Colosseum gradually ceased. History, in its subtle, often humorous way, finally intervened. You see, the brilliant Roman engineers eventually concluded that water and ancient concrete were not the best long-term romantic partners, their grand aqueous ambition literally undermining the very foundations of the magnificent structure. The constant flooding and draining caused immense structural damage, turning a logistical triumph into an architectural nightmare. This practical decision, born of structural necessity, adds another layer of profound, almost cosmic irony to Tiberius's fate. He was one of the last victims, a final, poignant casualty of a fundamentally absurd game, a grand, ludicrous spectacle that was ultimately abandoned due to the sheer impracticality of it all. His humble life, consumed by a watery stage, became a quiet footnote in the history of an entertainment form that literally couldn't hold water. This narrative is a silent invitation to reflect upon the profound smallness of individual human lives when caught within the grand, often absurd theatrical productions of history. It urges you to look beyond the dazzling spectacle, beyond the roar of the crowds, and to consider the quiet, often overlooked tragedies that unfold within their shadow. For sometimes human destiny, fragile as a spider's web, becomes inextricably tangled within colossal, utterly illogical performances, so vast and bewildering that those entrapped within them can scarcely comprehend their own bewildering role. Death in such grand, indifferent settings can arrive with a startling quietness amidst the thunderous cheers of a vast, oblivious crowd, as unnoticed and forgotten as a small boat lost and left adrift in an endless ocean of entertainment. How many countless, insignificant fates, like so many grains of sand, have silently plunged into the unseen depths beneath history's most flamboyant spectacles, utterly unrecorded by any grand chronicler, without a single soul truly noticing their passing. It's a poignant question, a quiet whisper in the vast, echoing chambers of time, reminding us of the overlooked stories and the profound, silent dignity of those swept away by forces beyond their control. As you drift into a peaceful slumber, let this reflection linger, a gentle current carrying you to the quiet depths of rest.
The air,
thick and strangely still, hung heavy with a peculiar blend of anticipation and morbid theatricality. You could almost taste the dust motes dancing in the muted sunlight, illuminating a stage set not for heroic combat, but for a chilling reenactment of ancient myths, where the lines between legend and brutal reality blurred into a single, terrifying tableau. From the depths of the beast pens, a faint, almost melodic whirring could be heard. Not the roar of a lion, but a mechanical groan hinting at some elaborate, yet utterly perilous contraption being prepared. The whispers of the crowd, usually a restless murmur, were hushed, tinged with a macabre excitement, as if they were about to witness a grand opera, only with far more fatal consequences. This wasn't merely entertainment, it was a perverted form of divine storytelling, where the actors were doomed and the ending was always written in blood. Here, in this chilling and bizarre prelude to doom, you encounter Silas. He wasn't a brawny gladiator, nor a bewildered farmer. No, Silas was a man whose entire universe revolved around the intricate dance of lines, angles, and perfect proportions. He was an architect, a master of stone and light, whose genius lay in the precise alignment of every block, every column, every meticulously calculated curve. He could, without a hint of irony, spend an entire sun-drenched Roman afternoon passionately debating the perfect degree of inclination for a single roof tile, or the most harmonious symmetry for a lone stately column. For Silas, sloppiness was not merely an oversight, it was a profound, unforgivable transgression against the very fabric of existence, a sin more egregious, perhaps, than than murder itself, to put it mildly. His hands, usually adorned with calluses from chisels and measuring tools, were as meticulous as his mind, incapable of tolerating even the slightest imperfection. His crime? A ludicrous charge, a true testament to the absurdity of Roman bureaucracy. He was condemned to die for designing a temple that was not sufficiently magnificent for a particularly corrupt and aesthetically challenged magistrate. A man of perfect order sentenced to chaos, a cruel twist of fate that mocked his very soul. This macabre form of public execution, a favorite of emperors with a penchant for both cruelty and dramatic flair, was known as the fatal charades. It was a chilling spectacle where condemned individuals were forced to participate in elaborate, often deadly reenactments of famous myths and legends. Imagine, if you will, the tragic flight of Icarus, or the eternal torment of Prometheus, or even the mournful descent of Orpheus into the underworld. But instead of skilled actors performing a theatrical illusion, these were men and women condemned to death, their very lives the raw material for the public's entertainment. The performers, you must understand, were not actors in any traditional sense of the word. No, they were simply human beings condemned to their deaths, their final moments transformed into morbid entertainment. Their cries of anguish were not feigned, their terror was not simulated. This was live theater with no second take, no curtain call, and a truly permanent ending for its unwilling stars. It was a terrifying fusion of entertainment and execution, where the boundaries between myth and reality dissolved in a brutal public display. The ironic twist in these fatal charades, a detail that would have sent Silas's meticulous architectural mind into a spiraling frenzy, was their utter disregard for historical or mythological accuracy. The Roman showrunners, ever pragmatic and focused on dramatic effect rather than scholarly precision, operated on a rather simple philosophy. If they happened to remember the original plot of the myth correctly, splendid. If not, they simply invented a brand new version on the spot. Perhaps one where Hercules accidentally lost a leg in a wrestling match with a particularly stubborn sheep. It was akin to witnessing a community theater production where the script was improvised on the fly, the costumes were cobbled together from whatever scraps were available, and the actors' lives hung precariously in balance with every misremembered line. The historical inaccuracies, to a man like Silas, were surely a greater torment than the impending physical pain. This casual disregard for authenticity added another layer of dark humor to the spectacle, turning profound myths into grotesque, improvisatory death scenes.
For his specific grim performance, Silas was cast as the ill-fated Icarus. His costume consisted of a pair of elaborate yet pathetically flimsy wings, crafted from a motley assortment of real feathers and brittle wax, already showing signs of inevitable structural failure. His stage was a precariously constructed high platform, built with all the finesse of a drunken stonemason on a tight deadline, designed for him to leap from. But instead of the expected terror or desperate pleas for mercy, a far more peculiar obsession consumed Silas. His architectural mind, a relentless engine of perfection, fixated on the sheer, unforgivable sloppiness in the construction of both his wings and the rickety platform. His lips, usually reserved for eloquent pronouncements on aesthetic harmony, began to move in a furious, almost deranged murmur. "This particular joint," he grumbled, his eyes narrowed with intense scrutiny, as if grading a first-year apprentice's botched assignment. "It utterly fails to meet even the most rudimentary structural standards. And this angle of inclination, for the love of all that is geometrically sacred, it will simply never generate sufficient lift. This entire contraption, I declare with the utmost certainty, must be the abominable product of a truly amateurish craftsman, utterly devoid of even the most basic understanding of aerodynamics or structural integrity." He was critiquing his death contraption as if it were a faulty aqueduct, his professional indignation eclipsing his personal terror. While his fellow condemned souls shrieked in primal fear, their voices echoing like trapped birds, Silas, oblivious to their terror, meticulously frowned. His mind, instead of succumbing to the overwhelming panic, was engaged in a furious, almost academic analysis of the complex dynamics of falling. He wasn't contemplating death, he was dissecting the physics of it. Even as he plummeted, a human projectile arcing toward the unforgiving earth, he continued to make frantic, utterly futile adjustments to his waxen wings, his delicate fingers twitching with a desperate, professional urgency.
It was as if he harbored a desperate, dying wish to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that if only the original design had been flawlessly executed, if only the craftsmanship had met his impossibly high standards, then Icarus, in all his mythological glory, truly could have soared to the sun, defying fate itself. He resembled a seasoned general, standing amidst the chaos of a losing battle, still frantically attempting to maneuver his troops with perfect strategic precision, only to realize with a crushing despair that his entire army was, tragically, comprised of nothing more than a few scattered chicken feathers. This black humor, this macabre blend of intellectual obsession and impending doom, sent a shiver down the spines of the Roman audience, even as a strange, uncomfortable giggle escaped their lips. It was unsettling, yet undeniably captivating. A grim and hilarious ballet of intellectual defiance in the face of inevitable destruction. This journey invites you to immerse yourself in the profound madness of a society so consumed by spectacle that it brazenly transforms the raw, terrifying act of death into an elaborate, grotesque form of art. It compels you to witness the poignant, almost unbearable tragedy of a brilliant intellect, a mind dedicated to order and perfection, forced with cruel irony to participate in such an utterly illogical and fatally flawed farce. It is a world turned upside down, where genius is punished and absurdity reigns supreme. Can the intricate workings of a brilliant mind, a fortress of logic and reason, possibly offer salvation from a cruel fate that has already been meticulously etched in stone? Or is it merely another, perhaps even more exquisite form of profound despair, a desperate intellectual dance on the very edge of the abyss? The performance of Silas, our tragically perfectionist architect, has only just begun to unfold its meticulously constructed yet fatally flawed movements. The intricate details of his fall, both literal and metaphorical, still await their full revelation, promising a contemplation of the absurd that will linger long after the echoes of the arena have faded. As you let the image of Silas, his brow furrowed in concentration even as he plummets, gently guide you into a state of deep tranquility, allow his story to remind you that even in the face of utter chaos, the human mind, in its boundless capacity for logic and obsession, can still find its own unique, often darkly humorous way to defy the inevitable. The scent of dry dust and stale blood, a familiar perfume in this colossal stone theater, mingled with an odd, almost palpable tension. You could feel it, a strange undercurrent of anticipation, like the hush before a particularly bizarre magic trick. The arena, usually a stage for overt brutality, was now cloaked in an unsettling atmosphere, tinged with a dark, almost cynical humor, for the spectacle about to unfold promised anything but fairness. Imagine if your mind dared to venture into such absurd landscapes, a chess match of epic proportions where your formidable opponent is not only blindfolded, their vision meticulously obscured, but the very chessboard beneath their fumbling fingers shifts and rearranges its squares at random, unpredictable intervals. Welcome, my dear listener, to the next bewildering act of Silas's grim performance, a macabre ballet choreographed by fate and absurdity. This was not a contest of strength, nor even of skill, but a cruel intellectual game designed to mock the very essence of reason, a torturous dance for an unwilling participant. This segment of the Roman games, designed to extract the maximum amount of entertainment from the condemned, often involved elaborate yet utterly rigged spectacles. These were the farcical wrestling matches of their age, where the condemned, like our astute Silas, found themselves utterly disadvantaged. Their enemies, whether human gladiators or ferocious beasts, were typically blindfolded, but not the condemned. Instead, the victims were often chained, their movements cruelly restricted, or given weapons so laughably disproportionate to their opponent's might that they might as well have been armed with a feather duster. The Roman audience, with their peculiar sense of humor, reveled in this skewed justice. Fairness, you see, was considered utterly boring, as dull as a forgotten philosophy scroll. But watching someone valiantly attempt to fight blindfolded, now that was universally hilarious. At least, for everyone except the unfortunate soul actually wearing the blindfold, of course. It was a cruel jest, a twisted form of irony, where the powerful amuse themselves by watching the utterly helpless stumble through a death dance. Suddenly, with a jarring rumble that vibrated through the very ground, a hidden trap door in the arena floor, a secret mouth of the earth, abruptly groaned open. You could hear the ominous creak of ancient wood, a sound as chilling as a whisper from the underworld. From the yawning darkness beneath, an unexpected opponent emerged, not a roaring beast this time, but a hulking, seasoned gladiator, his muscles rippling like carved marble, his armor gleaming like a second skin. He carried a heavy net and a trident, symbols of the retiarius, a net fighter, ready for his grim task. The crowd, momentarily startled, gasped collectively, their surprise rippling through the stands like a sudden gust of wind. Imagine, if you will, a wrestling match so bizarre that the very floor beneath you randomly decides to spit out a fully grown, rather grumpy bear. That's the kind of spontaneous, chaotic absurdity the Romans reveled in, only they executed it with chilling sincerity, their passion for novelty unyielding. This twist, the sudden introduction of a trained killer, was designed to utterly obliterate any lingering hope, turning a bizarre execution into a truly impossible contest. Silas, however, facing this impossible blindfolded match against a trained gladiator, surprised even himself. Instead of succumbing to the expected wave of panic, a strange, almost manic clarity descended upon him. His architectural mind, a finely tuned instrument of spatial reasoning, instinctively began to map the acoustics of the vast arena. He closed his eyes, not in despair, but in deep concentration, his other senses sharpening like honed blades. He listened with an almost supernatural intensity, deciphering the subtle echoes of the gladiator's heavy rhythmic footsteps on the dusty sand, discerning the faint ragged rhythm of his breathing, even pinpointing the minute shifts in the sand as the warrior adjusted his weight. It was a mental blueprint of chaos, a desperate attempt to impose order on an utterly disordered reality. And then, with a spark of his old sardonic wit, he even used his voice, his tone laced with a biting, intellectual sarcasm, to try and disorient his formidable opponent. "My esteemed gladiator," he called out, his voice clear and surprisingly steady, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Are you quite certain you aren't mistaking a perfectly innocent stone column for your intended target? My memory, though perhaps imperfect under these rather trying circumstances, vaguely recalls that human beings generally possess a pair of legs, not a single immovable base." His words, a verbal jab wrapped in sophisticated mockery, hung in the air, a peculiar challenge to a man of brute force from a man of pure intellect. The gladiator, momentarily flustered by this unexpected, almost philosophical taunt, hesitated, his brow furrowed in confusion, giving Silas a precious, fleeting second of advantage.
The grim reality of these Roman games, especially those involving condemned prisoners, was that they operated under no clear established rules. There was no governing body, no referee to blow a whistle, no concept of a fair fight. The entire spectacle operated purely on a minimalist yet brutally effective checklist of objectives. Was it entertaining? Yes. Was it utterly absurd? Absolutely. Could they clean up the mess swiftly enough before the next scheduled performance? Most certainly. This chilling lack of any discernible regulations further underscored the profound inherent injustice woven into the fabric of Silas's final match. He wasn't merely fighting a gladiator. He was battling against the capricious, illogical, and utterly merciless machinery of an entire empire's entertainment industry. It was a fight against the very concept of chaos, a brilliant mind desperately seeking patterns in a universe determined to remain gloriously, fatally random. Silas, with his acute architectural mind desperately trying to predict the unpredictable, and his sharp, sarcastic wit, managed to evade the gladiator for what felt like an eternity, a dizzying dance of intellect against brute force. He dodged, he weaved, he spun, guided only by the echoes of footsteps and the phantom maps of his brilliant mind. But eventually, even the keenest intellect cannot defy the laws of physics nor the crushing weight of an overwhelming, unyielding system. Silas finally succumbed not to a dramatic fatal blow, but to the sheer crushing exhaustion of trying to fight the relentless absurdity of the system that had condemned him. His demise was not violent. There was no spurting blood, no final agonizing shriek. Instead, his death came as a profound, almost peaceful letting go, a quiet capitulation of a mind pushed beyond its limits. It was a final sigh of pure intellectual weariness, a whisper of resignation from reason itself, surrendering to the overwhelming, relentless tide of madness that surrounded it.
The elaborate performance came to an end not with a thunderous ovation, but with a strange, almost reverent silence that blanketed the Colosseum like a sudden, collective moment of profound, unsettling realization. It was as if a brilliant scientist, after years of meticulous experimentation, was finally forced to accept with a weary heart that in this particular universe, despite all logical deductions, 1 plus 1 did not always in fact equal 2. His silence in that moment spoke louder than any roar, a powerful statement of intellectual surrender. This narrative extends a quiet invitation for you to contemplate the profound burden of sanity, the sheer weight of being acutely aware and brilliantly logical in a world that often seems utterly determined to revel in its own glorious, often deadly chaos. And death in such a world can become a bizarre, almost grotesque dance with the grim reaper himself, a final, unwilling pirouette for the entertainment of the masses. Is sanity, then, truly a crushing burden in a society that seems to revel, almost drunkenly, in the intoxicating allure of chaos and unreason? And will we ever, as human beings, truly learn to accept the unfair, often bewildering dances that fate so capriciously orchestrates for us? The moments when our meticulously crafted plans crumble before the inexplicable. Let the profound, almost spiritual silence of Silas, the echoing testament of a mind pushed to its absolute breaking point, gently lull you into a deep, restorative sleep, a realm where all logic, all reason can finally dissolve into the boundless, comforting embrace of nothingness. Rest now, and let the echoes of his final silent protest guide your dreams.
In the eternal twilight, beneath the colossal, echoing structure of the Roman Colosseum, where even the sun's most determined rays dared not penetrate, you discover a figure shrouded in shadow, a silent guardian of ancient mechanisms. He is an old man, his frame as stooped and gnarled as a centuries-old olive tree, its branches heavy with unspoken stories. His hands, like ancient parchment etched with the chronicles of time, are calloused and perpetually stained with the dark metallic grease of countless gears and pulleys, a testament to a lifetime spent wrestling with iron and sweat. He moves with a quiet, almost ritualistic rhythm, meticulously adjusting archaic levers, their surfaces worn smooth by the relentless passage of countless fingers and the sheer weight of unimaginable burdens. Lucius, you see, was less a man and more an organic extension of those very machines, ancient and silent, yet holding within their cold metallic hearts the most profound, earth-shattering secrets. He was a living, breathing component of the vast, intricate machinery of death and spectacle, a vital cog in a monstrous stone-hewn clock. This is Lucius, the venerable chief machinist, a man whose entire existence, every waking breath and every fleeting dream had been inextricably bound to the very foundations of the Colosseum. He was its silent heartbeat,
its unseen puppeteer. He possessed a memory as sharp and unforgiving as a newly whetted gladiatorial blade, capable of recalling every whir, every creak, every subtle groan of the gargantuan system he commanded. His personality, a charming blend of the eccentric and the profoundly solitary, meant he rarely engaged in pleasantries with his fellow men. Instead, he preferred the silent, profound company of his beloved machines, murmuring to their cold, metallic frames as if they were old, trusted friends. Or, at other times, he would simply whisper to himself, his voice a low, continuous drone, as if tirelessly solving complex, arcane equations that no one else in the world, not even the most brilliant Roman scholar, could possibly comprehend. His life was a symphony of rust, oil, and the silent, grinding gears of fate. Step with me now, if you dare, into the labyrinthine depths of the Colosseum's underworld, a vast, echoing maze hidden beneath the glorious spectacle above. Here the air hangs heavy with the damp, earthy scent of ancient stone and lingering decay, a subterranean perfume that clings to your lungs. The constant, melancholic gurgle of unseen water, perpetually trickling through forgotten conduits, serves as a haunting, liquid soundtrack to this subterranean realm. This is not the glamorous stage that the roaring crowds witness. This is the chilling, unseen engine room, the very belly of the beast. It is the place where every single dramatic flourish on the sun-drenched surface above was meticulously orchestrated with cold, calculated precision by men like Lucius. You, perhaps, were blissfully unaware, perched in the stands, that those ferocious beasts didn't simply materialize out of thin air, their roars shaking the very foundations of the arena. Nor did the sandy floor magically transform itself into a vast shimmering lake for the Naumachia. Oh no, my dear friend, it was never magic, not in the traditional whimsical sense. It was all the intricate, back-breaking magic of hidden levers and grinding cables, a meticulously choreographed symphony of iron and sweat, orchestrated by the unseen hands of men like Lucius. Lucius, in his silent, tireless devotion, was the very embodiment of the invisible hand that meticulously controlled every aspect of the deadly theatricality. He was the one who, with a mere flick of his wrist, manipulated the vast secret trapdoors, sending condemned souls or ravenous beasts spiraling into the blinding light of the arena above. He operated the colossal elevators, their ancient chains groaning under the immense weight, lifting gladiators and exotic animals alike to their destined, often brutal performances. And it was he who meticulously managed the intricate hydraulic systems, the vast network of pipes and channels that allowed the Colosseum to be flooded and drained with astonishing speed for the mock naval battles. He possessed an almost obsessive need for perfection, personally overseeing and certifying every single technical stage, ensuring that each and every unfair fate unfolded with the chilling, flawless precision of a master clock. With just a single, almost imperceptible press of my finger on this unassuming lever, He might have murmured to himself, his voice a low, raspy whisper echoing in the damp confines. The fate of some poor, defenseless soul would be irrevocably sealed. It was an immense power, wielded in the silent darkness, far from the roar of the crowds. It's almost like you're hitting the send button on an incredibly important email, only instead of a digital message, you're unleashing a rather famished Siberian tiger, roaring its displeasure. The weight of such invisible power was a constant, unspoken companion.
The true, unbearable tragedy of Lucius's life was not the physical toil, but the crushing, unyielding burden of memories. He didn't retain the grand, celebrated names of the famous gladiators, the ones whose triumphs were etched in history and sung by poets. Nor did he recall the faces of the most notorious criminals, their names forever stained with infamy. No, his memory, an archive of quiet suffering, clung to something far more intimate, far more poignant. He remembered the faces of the doomed as they were slowly, inexorably lifted from the suffocating darkness of the underground pens. He remembered the wide, terrified eyes, dilated with a primal dread that mirrored his own unspoken fears. He recalled the blank, hopeless stares, filled with a quiet, profound despair, a silent acceptance of their grim destiny. And sometimes, most hauntingly, he remembered the faint, almost ethereal smiles of resignation, those rare, defiant grins of individuals who somehow found peace in the face of an unavoidable end. He remembered the metallic tang of dried blood that permeated the very air he breathed, a ghost of countless past tragedies. He heard in the chilling quiet of his subterranean world the faint, desperate screams that echoed down the very drainage pipes, a macabre chorus of farewells. And he could still feel, decades later, the shuddering, grating rasp of the colossal cables as yet another enormous, bewildered beast was pulled upwards, unwillingly, into the brutal, blinding light. It was like being condemned to watch the same horrific film, a ghastly, unending loop, every single night, with the added torturous detail that you yourself were the silent, complicit director of every single agonizing scene. On moonless nights, when the vast Colosseum above him lay shrouded in an inky, oppressive darkness, its grandstands empty and silent, Lucius could still hear, echoing in the cavernous chambers of his dreams, the phantom creaking and groaning of the gears of fate, a relentless, haunting reminder of his silent, terrible role. Despite his absolutely pivotal role, his silent, tireless contributions to the seamless operation of the Colosseum's grand machinery, Lucius himself remained utterly anonymous, a ghost in the machine. He was merely a forgotten cog in the immense grinding apparatus of entertainment, an indispensable part of the spectacle that no one ever noticed, no one ever applauded. He had dedicated his entire life, every precious moment, every drop of sweat, to ensuring the perfection of these gruesome performances, yet his name remained unheralded, his meticulous precision utterly unsung. I have, in my long and rather peculiar career, meticulously helped countless individuals ascend to meet the Grim Reaper, ushering them towards their final, brutal encounter with destiny. He might have mumbled to himself, a dry, almost cynical chuckle escaping his lips. Perhaps, he would conclude,
his voice trailing off into the damp silence. "Perhaps that is truly for the best, a silent blessing in this cacophony of blood and glory." This profound anonymity, this complete and utter lack of recognition for a lifetime of thankless service, was, in its own quiet, poignant way, Lucius's very own unfair fate. But even in the deepest, darkest corners of this brutal, indifferent world, a flicker of profound humanity, a fleeting moment of unexpected tenderness could still emerge, like a fragile wildflower pushing through the cracks in ancient stone. There was one memorable occasion, a quiet anomaly amidst the usual grim routine, when a small, disoriented bird, perhaps seeking refuge from a sudden storm, inadvertently found its way into the intricate labyrinth of pipes and conduits deep within the subterranean system. It was hopelessly lost, fluttering frantically against cold, unyielding metal. Instead of leaving it to its inevitable, pathetic demise, Lucius, a man hardened by decades of witnessing brutality, devoted an entire precious afternoon to patiently, gently guiding the terrified creature back towards the distant, shimmering promise of daylight. That little bird, you see, possessed no ticket to the grand spectacle, nor was it destined to become part of any grisly performance. It was merely a fragile, bewildered creature that desperately needed an escape, a gentle hand to guide it towards freedom. This quiet act of compassion, a rare blossoming of empathy in a barren landscape of cruelty, revealed a profound, almost hidden reservoir of humanity still residing in the old man's weary soul, a gentle echo of kindness amidst a cacophony of a merciless world. This final narrative, my dear friend, extends a quiet and poignant invitation for you to reflect upon the countless forgotten fates that linger perpetually in the shadows, far behind the dazzling, often misleading lights of history's grandest stages. It urges you to ponder the silent, immeasurable burdens carried by those whose names history often neglects to record, individuals whose tireless efforts paved the way for glory or despair, but who themselves remained utterly, profoundly anonymous.
Now, as you listen closely to the whispering wind that drifts through the ancient hollowed arches of the Roman Colosseum, imagine, if you will, the ghost of Lucius, the silent conductor of life and death, his spectral hands still moving across phantom levers, his memory a symphony of forgotten sighs in silent departures. The profound, ancient secrets of the underground, the faint, ethereal whispers of those ancient, tireless machines, their gears eternally turning in the darkness. Could these, perhaps, be the most tragic, the most profoundly beautiful stories that have ever yearned to be told, yet have until now remained utterly unheard, waiting patiently in the silent depths for a listening heart? Let this thought, as gentle as a lullaby, guide you now into the deepest, most tranquil slumber, where the weight of memory can finally dissolve into the boundless peace of dreams. And so, our journey through the Colosseum's whispered secrets draws to a gentle close. Thank you for walking alongside us through these tales of humor, tragedy, and profound human spirit. As the echoes of these ancient lives fade, remember that every story, big or small, carries a piece of truth.
If this shared experience has brought you a moment of peace, insight, or simply a smile, please leave a like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where these stories found you. Until our next adventure, may your own journey be filled with peace and wonder.